Have you ever noticed that you can talk about yourself without ever saying I? Like, I did that, I was that. You can always like generalize and say it has been done or we did that. This is true even in Italian. In Italian, you can talk about yourself like for hours without ever specifying the subject. And that's something that I always felt like it was being polite. With years and with 5 years of therapy, I realized that it is mostly actually a way of protecting yourself. It's distance that you're building between what you're saying and the version of yourself that it's saying it. After 5 years of therapy, I still cannot say which version of myself I am. I started with a lot of questions, and I would say I have more than what I started with. But at least I learned to look for those patterns, and I realized, like, for example, that I always hide it behind my look. Maybe you've heard that sentence, a look can say a lot within itself. But that's, I mean, for me, it just meant that I could have hidden behind my green eyes and just let the silence talk, which is a cool thing to do when you're a kid, but when you grow up, you realize that communication is essential, especially in relationship. So now maybe you are in the same situation that I am. So in between the kid that you were built into and the adult that you are meant to be. Because I don't know if you noticed, but your first character gets built without even your consent. When you're a kid, your parents, the context you grow up in, they shape what you are. And if you don't realize what has been shaped, I mean, which version of yourself was built, you will never evolve that, you'll never grow through that. In my case, there was a hole in it. There was a hole in the system, in the process, because I didn't have a father. I mean, mine left when I was a kid. So I didn't have that man reference in my life, and I had to build my own. And when this happens, usually you end up catching, bits and pieces all around until you build a version of what you think a man should be, and then you just follow that, no matter if it is right or wrong. So the old video, it's about this. It's about sharing with you that maybe you are in the same journey, this realization, this process, these lessons that I managed to catch in 5 years of therapy to distinguish the kid that lives in my adult body and the adult I want to become. So when you're a kid, you experience a lot. Whatever your parents says, whatever the context you grow up in, and you think that is normal, that it's the average. The world is like that. And based on that, you grow up thinking that everything else should look similar, which is a kind of strong assumption, especially if you start then realizing that outside of that bubble, there are so many cultures, so many countries, and so many ethnicities that might approach and have completely different principles than yours. But then it doesn't mean that that version it's wrong. So until you're a kid, then everything is kind of justified, right? But then when you grow up, it is essential to look to realize whatever has been installed in you at the beginning and what you need as an update. Sorry for this parallel with computers, it's just that I feel familiar with it. And one of the first relationships that you build, which then becomes the standard for you in life, is the one with your parents, the one especially with your mom. Freud helps us here. And based on that, based on your relationship with your parents, then your whole life is shaped around. In my case, as I said at the beginning, I missed a piece because my father was not there. My grandma took the place for him, but that was not the same thing because I was missing male representation, a male figure. So considering that my mom, she was acting to protect me, so she was telling me about my father and she was trying to picture him in the best way possible, then I sort of built myself a version of him that it was not necessarily the truth, but then that one for me became the reference. It might be the same for you if you missed one of your parents. That's how it works. And what happened was that I started looking those same parameters in all the people and all the men that I met from that moment on, so since I was a kid. And all those people became for me mentors that had this sort of role of replacing my father. So I didn't inherit a father, I had to build one myself, and then I tried to become him. In the end, I feel like we all are our mother's or parents' desire that is wearing our face. But that desire, that figure, becomes this sort of cumbersome guest that you keep with you, you bring it with you, and then you talk with him almost every day of your life. When you wake up in the morning and then when you are about to go to sleep, that voice in your head, it's always this, in Italian we call it ospite ingombrante. This guest that you always have in some way to make happy and to listen, but most of the times it just drives you crazy and drives you in so many different directions. And what I felt like, if I would be able to count as many times I spend my afternoons or mornings just listening the thoughts and having discussions by myself, I might have lived several lives, which made me think that maybe to understand ourselves, one life is not enough, because as soon as you start realizing some stuff, then you're growing up and you need to learn even more. And what might happen to you, that at least happened to me as well, that in order to fit that guest in all the situations that you come across in your life, then you build masks. One mask for each room, one mask for each relationship, one mask for each contact. And then it takes so much, it's so long, and it's so hard to take those masks off, but even just to realize that you have those masks on. So that's why of therapy. Therapy for me, it's essential. In my opinion, you need therapy as much as you need your basic doctors for medicines and for your body. With my therapy, for example, I learned that most of the times we try to explicate and to understand how our mind works with the whys. So why I did that, why it is like that, why I think that. But most of the times those questions were just bounced back at me, because the real point is not why, it's what. What do you feel? What's your emotion in that moment? And it's really complex to learn how to distinguish those emotions and to connect the dots of your childhood, of your life, of your experiences, of your traumas, because you can't really answer what you feel with why you feel it. And feeling kept in your head turns real actually only when you say it out loud. So going back to what I started the video with, not talking is not the solution. Hiding behind never using the subject or never saying I was not the solution. I thought that I was strong because I was able to be quiet, to say something with just my look. The reality was that I was just closed. I was still not ready to open myself and to face others people's opinions and just challenge that subject that I have in me with the world that surrounds me. So with the new experiences and trying to grow that subject, trying to grow with that guest in order to hand in hand sort of become that version that you aspire to be. So now I force myself to say I force myself to record these videos, I force myself to talk about my journey and my experiences both here and on Substack, because that's actually the point. Because the point is that I never actually wanted to avoid sharing about myself. It's just that I didn't know how, and I felt like justified to close because of my traumas. So the point is, you, which part of you did you actually choose? Maybe while you're realizing the answer to this question, you can just start recording a video and look straight at the camera and start sharing yourself. It might help. For me, it did a bit. And of course, therapy, that's mandatory. But thank you for watching, and yeah, that was it. So now I will leave you enjoying this beautiful Swedish summer lake view, and let's see the next one. Ciao.